Hello and welcome to the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host Mike.
And I'm your co-host Alex.
And today we are beginning our discussion of Skyward, starting with Volume 1, Issues 1 through 5. And this is your second or many times reading this now?
This is probably, I haven't reread this a ton. It's probably my third time reading it.
Okay.
I'm sure I visited at least one time before.
Yeah, I mean, I basically thought it was a perfect volume of like a trade paperback. Like, I can't believe I missed this.
I think it's really strong. I think you get everything you need to get into a story. To be introduced to a story and then immediately be kind of invested in it.
I mean, there are plot developments here that other books would have taken until issue 12 to hit.
They move quickly, which makes me wonder. I wonder if this is a question of this. We know now that this book ran 15 issues. And we'll talk when we get towards the end how I feel about that length for this story that they're trying to tell. But regardless of whatever plan they had, if they even had a plan for how long they thought they might go, they don't mess around. They don't waste any time. Like, they get right into it and they establish the world and the stakes right away. Like there is no just kind of living in a world, which you would think for a book like this, given its premise, you could be tempted to do that. You could be tempted to have your first volume just be like, here's what the world is like, and then at the end of
let me tell you my nightmare.
First arc.
I thought of what my nightmare version of this is. My nightmare version of this story would be if, I don't know, let's say her mom happened to go into a coma before G-Day, and Volume 1 is her mom wakes up and is introduced to the world without gravity and, finds out her husband's a recluse and all of this stuff. And it's just an excuse for 5 issues to dump expositional dialogue. She asks all the questions the readers are asking, and you just answer them slowly, painfully. And it's like, I don't need that. I praised it, after in the Zero episode, because in the first issue, there's not really any dialogue about like how things work. And I found myself like, I started thinking about it. Like, I read, 2 or 3 issues, and I was like, I wonder what rain is like in a zero gravity world. And then bam, like immediately it happens. And it's like, right, there's no reason for these characters to say it to each other because they all have been living it for 18, 20 years.
Yeah.
The only people curious about that are the readers. And it's like, we'll get to it. It'll come up.
And they established so quickly the idea that the elite, the upper crust, the ones that have like the mag boots, who are still, as we kind of see, like they're kind of living in denial of what the world is like and how they never look up. And so they immediately establish this disparity between in society, and none of that is odd because no one's asking, well, why? It's just because this is how the world has been for 20 years. This is the way everyone just accepts it, and they let the reader catch up to these facts.
Yeah,
they let the reader ask these questions, be like, well, I wonder about this, and then it's introduced and it's not explained. You just understand that in order for anyone to exist, anyone to live as if the world were like it were before, you have to have a level of wealth. They show that to you right there. And that you wonder about, is there anyone still on the ground? Yes, there are. And you don't have to be told that explicitly other than when you show them that mad boots exist. Right? That there is a knowledge that exists that can ground you and you can still walk around and do whatever. You have an immediate understanding of the split in society, and you understand the people that are up in the air and the people that are on the ground, and inherently what that means. And it's done so quickly and efficiently. And I think the idea for me of that being introduced so quickly and that being forefronted in this first volume, because I think, as I was beginning to say a little earlier, there's a version of a story like this where your first arc is you just follow Willa around. Like maybe she's just doing her everyday stuff for like 5 issues. She's doing a messenger thing. We see what society is like up in the clouds, in the sky, as it were. And then maybe the end of your arc is this boom. Oh, wait, there are folks still on the ground. How does that work? What's going on with that? End of arc, boom.
Yeah.
And then your second arc is exploring the world here, the totality of the world, and seeing everything that's going on. But they condense all that down and throw it at you right at the beginning, so you get the world and you get the stakes. You understand what it means to be on either side of society. I said, just not wasting any time and just throwing the reader right into it, but in a way where the reader doesn't feel lost. At least I never felt that way. When I read it the first time and every subsequent time, I never felt lost. I never felt behind. I felt like I was being given answers in a way, or being shown answers in a way that made sense logically, and was kind of catching up almost to, like you said, when you're like, I wonder what rain is like, and then boom, you're there, you get rain.
Right.
So it's almost like they can anticipate the questions that the reader might have, and they're able to stay like just ahead of them, and knowing that they're going to come, knowing that they're going to show that, and they're going to show it early. They're going to answer that stuff about the world right away.
Yeah, I think the masterful thing here is that I interpreted issue 1 of being like, oh, this is just kind of a goof, for fun type thing. They don't intend to answer any of these questions, but they keep surprising me and proving like, oh no, like, we've thought this through, but we're telling a story. You're asking about the premise, and the premise isn't the story. And I think that is usually what I critique about sci-fi is they're like all about the pitch and the setup and the world building, and never get around to like good characters and story. Or they do, good characters but no story, or epic story, but the characters are all, 2-dimensional cardboard cutouts.
It's a lot of times one or the other.
Exactly.
You can tell what the author or the creator's focus was. This is why we want to tell this story, and then everything else is kind of left aside. And I think that makes sense, though, in terms of what we talked about last week when we previewed the book, is the idea that the science behind this, A, like doesn't hold up in any way whatsoever, and B, that's a feature in this case, not a bug, because the book's not about that. The book is simply about the problem and trying to fix the problem, not actually what the problem like would mean for the world.
Right.
And so because they're not focused on that and they're not being nitpicky about it, I think the way that I've interpreted it is that they're giving the audience, the reader, the license to also ignore it.
Right.
Because the science is clearly not consistent. The science is, and not even like logically correct. But they're not bothering about that.
But there's an internal logic to it.
Yes, and
like
yes,
you don't see someone say like it doesn't work this way, and then the next issue you see someone doing that.
For the most part, yes, I would agree with that. They define what their rules are, even if the rules wouldn't actually be that way if you really broke it down scientifically. But what they're saying is that stuff isn't like, no one in the world is questioning the physics of the world, which means we are also not supposed to question it. There's no one being like, what, like, it's funny. I was talking to my brother about this a few days ago. And like I was telling to him, he was talking about some of his nitpicks from a scientific standpoint, which I understand given how his brain is wired and also how my brain is wired. And I was saying of all the kind of the inconsistencies of what the world would actually be like, the only one that I personally have to like actively work against is the idea of, is the presentation of lack of air resistance. In that even if you're floating in the air, even if you float off, even if you fire a gun, you will not travel forever in the stratosphere. At some point, air resistance will slow you down in the atmosphere. The reason that doesn't work on the moon or in space is because you don't have air. So even if you floated away with velocity, at some point air resistance would slow you down. Now, if you flew off at some point at some speed, that where you slow down, maybe somewhere in
you'd
the
have exit velocity. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was at no point in which a person would have enough escape velocity to exit the atmosphere. Otherwise, they'd be dead before they got there. Like if you're moving at that speed to escape velocity, because gravity doesn't reduce air resistance, and so that's, to me, that's the one thing. Like when they have it's a great shot, by the way. It's a great panel when you see Earth and you see a little bit of a ring around it, like Saturn, and then they zoom in closer, and that ring is made of like humans and cars and structures and things like that. Like there's a junk belt around the world now. It's a great visual, but that just wouldn't happen. Like that is just not how it's going to be. And so for me, that's like the one thing I have to actively turn my brain off on, to say, like, in this world, we decided that air resistance does not matter. And that, because the idea of firing a gun, so it's like gravity got a screwiest planet, and apparently so did Newtonian physics. And you just have to accept that and move on. But again, because none of the characters, everyone in the world understands this is how it is now. And so you, as the reader, have license just to accept it. If there was someone being like, well, why doesn't, why do we float away? That isn't how things are supposed to work. Any scientist would actually say that, but no one in world says it. So no reader out in our world reading it should have that critique as well. Because again, the book is not trying to make a commentary from a scientific standpoint on that way. So again, that's a me thing. That's the one hurdle I have to always get over, of like, just you have to accept what you're shown, and kind of like what you said, like, these are the rules we're establishing. It's not about what the rules would actually be. It's what the rules we say are rules.
To me, I'm making the same leap that we would make in fantasy, right? In fantasy, it's like, sure, you tell us what the rules are, but once you say them, you better obey them.
Sure. Yeah.
With it being earthbound, we transpose a lot of what we know about our Earth and impose that on the story. I'm not sure that's fair, but also, like, it would have been way too much world building to just do the same story on a fictionalized version of Earth.
It would have been. Oh, and also, if you're trying to get that granular with it now you've turned this into like a hard sci-fi book, when in reality, I think you're right. When you look at a book like this book would qualify like not as science fiction. It probably would be more in that urban fantasy setting. It would be considered kind of a fantasy-ish book. And I think that is the vibe they're going for. They're going for sci-fi vibe, even though the inherent problem, issue, whatever it is quote unquote science fiction based. That isn't the vibe they're going for. They really are going for this kind of light fantasy world, and I think we'll see that going forward more. So, I think that's a good comp. The idea of is more of a fantasy story, but you are totally right, because it's set in our world, in our setting. It's meant to be our world, but just kind of clicked one bit to the side. It's harder to make that leap at times. That if it's our world, the reaction of things, the reaction of a supernatural event should map on to the way we think our world should work.
Yeah,
even though it's a supernatural event, that means anything should be in play. It's harder to overcome that at times.
I'm not sure I could stomach someone's complaints about that complaint, because it's like, well, if that's what you want, it's going to be hard to find a comic that gets that world buildy. I think you just want prose, hard sci-fi novels, and that's great. They're great. I think for this medium, it should be more focused on storytelling than world building.
And I think it's one of those things that, like, if that's your reason for not liking the book, like, fine, whatever, just stop reading it. Like, I can accept you kind of not understanding what's going on. I think it's a valid note to put out there, but like I said, it no way interferes with my enjoyment of the story. But it is just something I have to actively remind myself what kind of story I'm reading and what kind of book I'm reading. And once I get my mind in that space, that's totally fine. But it is something that comes up, and so it doesn't detract from my enjoyment of the reading or enjoyment of the story, because I think there's so many other good things I really like about it. So, but yeah, it's a no.
Okay, so character by character, I mean, we have like 5 characters. You have like villain, main character, sidekick, possible romantic interest, dad. And by the end of this volume, presumably you're down to 4 characters. It is clearly a self-sacrificial act. Whether it will actually result in his death or not is intentionally vague, which makes me think probably not dead. But you still get the big emotional beat of his death. Which is,
regardless, you're still only talking about a handful of characters,
right? Small cast, big world, love it. Like there's I'm all about that. And the villain, I would say, I like almost a Marvel villain problem. Like he seems cartoonishly bad, but I keep waiting for a little more complexity from him. But here's the thing: I've softened.
What do you mean by
on
cartoonishly bad?
He's like his motives are so transparent. No, he's just. It's obviously such a morally reprehensible and evil thing to say. I'm going to keep this world from fixing this problem that tore the world apart because I alone am profiting from the situation of it. But I think that's like a really pre-2020s attitude towards villains, because it's like, oh, I'm, every day now we're watching people just so blatant, so transparent in their motives. Like that is what villains are.
That I had that note down, the idea of maybe the thing that's aged the best out of this, and not in a good way, is his attitude. And you're right, just the egregiousness of it, of like not even being apologetic, but being like, yeah, man, like I made these things, I sell them, people buy them, I make money. Like this is why would I want to change this? This is working in my favor. And that idea of for lack of a better term, like war profiteering. This isn't a
right.
You know what I'm talking about. It's just the idea of like tragedy or catastrophe profiteering, that sort of thing. And to be so overt about it, you read that now and you're like, oh yeah, that's literally every billionaire on the planet right now. Which isn't a lot of them, but they're all terrible, and they're all terrible in effectively the same way. And that is a more relatable. Even if the specific circumstance in the book isn't relatable, that attitude certainly is. And I agree 1,000% that this book, as far as it just came out in 2017, so you're talking 2016, 2017 in the ideation of it, right? So.
Well, and this was one of those where technically I think people were a little ahead of their time then, because I remember my reaction to the seventh Star Wars movie, Force Awakens. Yeah. I remember talking about that. Went to the theater, saw it with friends, and they were like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, "Oh, it's really fun. It was kind of color by numbers. Very much a redux of A New Hope." But I love A New Hope. And I was like, but like my one complaint is like, it just seems so incredibly lame for them to be like, you remember the Death Star and how in the 6th movie we rebuilt the one from the 1st movie? Well, in the 7th movie, we're rebuilding it again. And
even bigger.
Right. Even bigger, even dumber than before. And I was like, saying like, yeah, I just thought that was lame. And my friend, I like will never forget this, because he was like, that's exactly what the world does. And I was like, oh yeah, you might be right. Like that is precisely what countries do. It's what dictators do. Is like, oh, you knocked that one down, great, now I have an excuse, because like your agitation blowing up the last one proves the need for it. So now I'm justified in building another one, an even bigger one. And it's a really vicious
on that same
cycle.
On that same token, too, I remember a lot of talk people like, the New Order, that's just the Empire again. Like, how could fascists rise again after what they just saw? And, to a handful of years there, be like, yeah. How could fascism rise again after what we've been through? That's really weird, isn't it? Boy, that's really fictional. But yeah, there is something about that. And so, yeah, there. I do wonder, even then, even going back to 2016, 2017, having an idea of your villain being this kind of monomaniacal billionaire, with ill intent. Yeah. I don't want to say it wasn't like that. It was in the air. Like, we knew these people were terrible. We didn't know how bad. We knew they weren't, like, no one was being like, how dare you take on billionaires right. At the time this book came out. But there is a level of prescience that I don't think they were trying to do. I think it's one of those things where the world just be like, oh no, that's just who they are. Like, no one predicted anything. This was just like the inevitable end. Like, everyone predicted this because we thought, what's the worst thing people in that position could do is profit off the world's misery. And then that's just what they end up doing. And so I think situations like that, they end up seeming more prescient. But yeah, when you read it now, you can't help but see, like, there's an obviousness to it, right? There's an obvious, of course, that's who the bad guy is. Of course, that's what his motivation would be, because our world has changed around when and the environment this book was originally published in and conceived in, which I don't know if that helps or hurts the book or not, but you do have to put yourself back, be like, there was a time when these people were seen as the villains and everyone was like, yeah, they're the villains, and now they're the people that are actually in charge of things, because the people in charge decided that they're going to put those people in charge, which again is terrifying. But it's the world we live in now,
right? And now the commentary is like, why is everyone so anti-villain?
Yeah.
Like, like the fact that they keep being like, wow, this Daredevil Born Again show is so prescient, and it's like, I mean, it is still basically ripping stuff straight out of the comics from 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that was when things were relatively fine in the country. So it's just like, good art is evergreen, and
it's the same thing. It's the same thing with Andor. The idea of like, oh, how prescient is it? It's like, well, no, they just looked at fascism and were like, this is bad. Here's how we're going to comment on it. It wasn't the show's fault that the world got more fascistic. Right. They were saying the Empire is by nature a fascist system. And so in a show about combating that, this is what they're going to show, this is what we're going to depict. And they're not trying to comment on the world. It's that this is the world we live in, and this is the world the show lives in. And the same thing with Born Again, I think, as well. The fact that it is more, in my mind, it's more the world becoming like the show than the show commenting back on the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
The show is the show, and what they're saying and what they're depicting and the storylines they're following. It's just that the world has gotten more like fiction now.
Well, here's the real question.
More prescient.
Like, the real question for me is, like, would you enjoy this story if it weren't prescient in the moment? And the answer is like, yes. Which means I'm not reading it for its prescience or particular commentary on a particular time. It's unfortunate when those themes emerge so blatantly, but
definitely,
that just is what it is. So
yes, 100%.
Anyway, like, I don't think this is like the author's big takedown piece on Trump, the Trump administration, or anything.
Exactly. Oh, I agree. That's what I'm saying. It's not about them saying something at the time. It was them simply crafting a story of like, this is what evil people would do in this situation. And then when those situations arrived in real life years later, turns out, yes, that is what evil people would do. So again, it is life becoming more like art versus art trying to predict what life is going to be. Because I'm sure if you ask Joe Henderson and Lee Garbett, they'd be like, hey, is this what you want to see happen in the world? They'd be like, no, this isn't what we want to see what happens in the world. We're not trying to predict anything. We don't want to see this, but we're trying to show a world in which these people exist. And then that world comes to pass. That's not the fault of the book, and that's not the book being, oh my God, they predicted it. It's more just that's how screwed up our society and world is now.
Yeah, I mean, like anyone who thinks this is a prediction is that, and I'll say like that just stood out to me about the villain, and I had that thought process. Mm-hmm. I really think what they're going for is like a simplified villain. Like I don't.
Oh yeah.
I'm not even sure they're going meta and saying like, but this is what our villains are like in real life. It's like, no, we needed someone to tell the story we want to tell, and it's a character story. And so you need an opposition. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe how quickly she's confronting the villain. The villain within seconds of meeting her is like, hey, so I'm evil, and gonna kill you and your dad now.
I was gonna say that too. He puts on the act, right? Of like, oh yeah, you mean your father, we did that, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But we know that he's putting on an act as he's talking to her. And then within the span of that one issue, it's a matter of pages, right? I don't have it pulled up exactly right now, but when she breaks into the party and they're having the little like walk and talk there, like very quickly, like because we the reader know that he's lying to her and he's putting on an act trying to lure information out of her, and then by the end of that he drops it too with her, and so yeah, everyone's on the same page now. And it's just there's no guys. He doesn't keep up this act he doesn't keep up the facade of what he was started with. That he drops that immediately too, and we know the sides, we know the stakes, we know where everyone stands. There is no deception. We're no longer ahead of any of the characters in the story. We now know what they know. They aren't doing the creators aren't doing that thing where they're giving us that anticipation of like, well, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's Willow going to figure this out? When's she going to understand? Blah, blah, blah. That happens almost immediately. And she knows the stakes and we know the stakes. And she also understands right away that she made a mistake too.
Oh yeah.
They pursue that. It wasn't just like she understood that, what she thought about how the world works, even in this world that she's grown up in, is not the way that things are. And she's immediately put on the back foot and has to kind of rebound from that. So it automatically gives our main character a bit of growth and somewhere to go to. She doesn't stay this kind of naive, wide-eyed, wannabe explorer, traveler character, which is very
Bambi-esque. Yeah.
He's very, very, very stereotypical, right? The naive girl or the naive character, oftentimes they're women, which is unfortunate, but that character who's like, I know everything, I've seen the world, I want to go out there, and then they have that world-shattering realization that the world isn't what they dreamed it to be, and they have to rebound from that. Here we get it very, very quickly, and she understands the stakes and then sees there's something larger to there, that it isn't just the world that she's in they have to accept, but that there may potentially be a fix, through her father. We don't know what that is yet, but we know that he thinks he has a fix. So it from a story standpoint, at least from Willa's standpoint, our main character, like her situation and thus the story goes from like 0 to 100 super fast, like in like 2.5 issues, maybe 3 issues out of the 5. Once she goes down into the party to the very end of the arc, like we're going at full speed, just barreling through story setup, because clearly they want to get to the next thing. We're setting this up. You understand the danger that she's in and the motivation of the bad guys. They do it all very quickly, efficiently.
Yeah. We need to talk about Lee's art a little bit, because I think this is, it's just really gorgeous, but I think he had a particular challenge of having, without having access to see the script. I'm guessing their description of this zero gravity is not as specific as like a really hard sci-fi writer would write, which probably leaves a lot of like research or thinking, or probably long conversations about like, well, what would specific panels look like what would it look like when she fires the gun, little things like that, what do you call it when your arms are blown back when you shoot? Recoil, right? How is the recoil impacted? Obviously she uses it as a jet, which is funny because in this world, guns actually are used for self-protection, and still considered dangerous and aggressive on the ground. Although, isn't it interesting that even in this setting, what rich people want is some idealized version of the past?
Yeah,
they're like, oh, we don't have gravity anymore. We're gonna go back to the time when there was gravity, and only the rich people will have it this time around. I thought that was, again, interesting. I didn't take that as specific comment. I thought initially when they said like, oh, the people on the ground are still just pretending like they're like this never even happened. I thought initially the direction that was going was like, oh, these are like people still willfully plugged into the matrix or something, like people who have refused enlightenment or something, or just too scared to do what needs to be done. And now I'm, they obviously, people in the sky judge people on the ground, and people on the ground seem to not talk about people in the sky. Do you think that's a relationship? Yeah. Pretend I think, that's not happening up there.
Yep. It's very much the it's the Don Draper, like, I don't think about it at all thing.
Yeah.
Because they and maybe this metaphor, like, they're above them physically, they think that they're below them because they don't have any money. Well,
like and the assumption of if the world had money, changed, but they would want these boots.
Yeah.
Like if they had money, they would do the things with it that we're doing. So they must not have money.
Yeah. Exactly. Or they can't earn it, or they don't want it, or whatever it is. Like, the world changed for them, not for us. It's like that. It's that kind of binary for the people on the ground. And so, because they're not us, we don't think about that. I think Willa says something about that, right? That as she's escaping the party, that people on the ground, they never look up.
Yeah.
So it's like, so the idea of like, although it would make sense, like where this person is hiding off to, probably not on the ground. So you got to look up, but no one ever does. And so no one would bother to care about her existence. And that's how in this world, and this one actually may be some commentary, that's how the elite class looks at the people they think are lower than them. You just pretend they don't exist because they don't bother me. Not my concern.
Well, certainly a comment on
there is commentary in this book,
right? Yeah.
If there is overall commentary in this book, I think it's that specifically. It's that idea, the idea of the class divide. I think that is something they're making a comment on, and it's just being actualized in their story through the idea of gravity, or manipulating gravity.
Yeah. Well, the line I keep waiting to hear that will make all the subtext float up to the text, which I don't think it'll happen. But if someone on the ground with their gravity boots said something to someone from the sky about their inability to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, referring to the gravity boots, I think that would be, it's like, that could either be an amazing line, like, wow, what a singer, or it could be like really cringy. I don't think it's going to happen.
Really cheesy. Yeah.
But there are writers who could pull that off.
There are in the right situation, in the right moment. You could get that.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of her dad as a character. It seems borderline tropey for him to be
very much so.
So recluse. Because we're not really given the impression that there are other people like him that are like that isolated from all of this.
Yeah, that one is tough And this is one where I think I know how they could have solved that, but I don't think I would have wanted to see it. And what I mean by that is, I think we could have solved his character a little more if we saw some of the work he was doing on Gravity before G-Day. If we saw him doing something and understanding, and him like maybe trying to be the whistleblower and no one's listening to him, and that frustration, and then G-Day hits and he's like, see, I was right. Oh my God, I lost my wife. I couldn't save her. This is the yada, yada, yada. That would give more context to him as a character. But as a reader, I don't think I want to see that. I want to get into the action, because he isn't our main character. And so I don't really, it's not that I don't really care about him, but I only care about him in terms of his relationship to Willa and how Willa sees him. But I agree completely that he's very tropey, the recluse, but he's also the genius. He's the one guy that knew what was going to happen, Yeah. So there is. And so I think it's fitting that, him being like, I got to make the sacrifice to save my daughter because I didn't do that to save my wife. Yeah, blah, blah. It's probably beneficial to the story if he's removed from the equation. Because otherwise it becomes one note. He's only one note.
Right.
And so he can't add but only so much to the story if he's only harping on one straight line. And so the story,
especially if he's written down, all of his contribution to the story is already written down.
Yes.
In a notebook. He conveniently hands the notebook off.
And but by doing that from a story standpoint, now you have someone who, no shade, is probably not as smart as him, now trying to interpret what he's written.
Right. That's the new quest.
Exactly. You have the answers,
by
you're
inheriting
still one person removed from it.
Exactly. And by inheriting that quest in kind of a traumatic way,
yes,
what you get is, I think we're going to skip her debate about the merits of doing it or not doing it, because now it's like, well, he saved my life and he gave me this, and if I don't do it, he wasted his life and, he died for nothing. So now she's in a position where it's like, well, shoot, now I have to do this. I don't have the luxury of debating whether we want the world to go this way or not, which means she's going to run full steam ahead with this plan to save the world. And it could go very poorly for her romantic interest, who will not be in favor of getting rid of zero gravity.
Yeah. And Edison being someone who is, we should say.
But those seeds were planted very early. Like there was no discussion of reversing the thing back when you found out, she had a crush on him. He would be wheelchair bound if there were gravity. So that's just all good plotting. And that's and it's, again, when you're reading that stuff, it feels so surface level that it feels tropey. It's like, oh, that's the one person who would really benefit from this zero G environment. And of course she's got a crush on him and she says the wrong thing. She puts her foot in her mouth, a very pedestrian scene. But then when you realize her quest is going to be to reinstall gravity, and she's doing it now because there are two loves in her life, her dad and her friend here, and either her dad wasted his life saving her for nothing, and spending all that time, being recluse and misanthropic for nothing, or you piss off this guy. It's just like every time I think they're kind of phoning it in or just kind of yada yadaing, they end up paying it off.
Well, and I think what the Edison character is meant to represent is not just him, right? There are probably a lot of people for whom this increased mobility is a boon. He's just the direct stand-in, but they go out of their way to introduce a character in a situation, you're right, completely just kind of nonchalantly, like, oh, this is her coworker, this is her secret crush, yada, yada, yada. And it's just representative of, there's some real benefits here, potential benefits for the idea of being able to have this kind of mobility that isn't restrictive, isn't restricted by gravity, someone in his situation. Absolutely. To show that the world, the situation of the world maybe isn't inherently bad. The idea of,
no, it's not intrinsically bad, although
that there are people that,
like
it's
they
the
did
people
mention
maybe
like
that make it bad, that sort of thing.
Like crops and irrigation, things like that were just totally out the window, which presumably led to some degree of mass starvation, right?
Yeah,
There's just no way.
Yeah, and that's another one of those things of them just establishing the rules and saying this is how it is, because again, there's no like logical or scientific reason for that would be that way. But yeah, there is just a lot of them saying that there are some negative side effects, but we figure it out. Right, we're going to figure out how to live this way. There are benefits, there are positives and negatives. I think they do a good job establishing that it's not all like the world changed, but it didn't go to hell completely. Not everyone's life was terrible by it. There are plenty of benefits, and there are a lot of bad things that came out of it, but a lot of those bad things were probably nature-based. Like I said, they talk about the crops and things like that, but a lot of it was also man-made. A lot of the problems were man-made problems, and those are the ones they're trying to solve too. And they throw all that out there. They present that to the reader, and I think it works fine. I think, again, you're not lost as to what the stakes are. It's very, very clear. And I wonder if some of that, again, comes from Joe Henderson's TV background. We talked about it in our last season with Manifest Destiny and Chris Dinks, having someone who is versed in television writing, maybe thinking about this a little more clearly and not when, because most television pilots, they're a premise pilot, right? But you still get into the world and you understand what's happening right away. Then it's just a matter of repeating that over and over again. Not wasting any story time in this book, throwing you right into and saying, off we go. I wonder if some of that comes from that TV background.
I'm almost certain it does, because I think people who know how to break beats down, the highest form of that is film and television. And, I think there are a lot of comic writers, especially in the indie world, and we've given our one night a week for years and years now to discussing this. We love indie comics, but there are writers who are they could benefit from a writing workshop, a beat workshop, like something that would just put a little more polish on it, because it's a heavy lift for a lot of comic editors, I would imagine, having to coach all these people who are I read a lot of comics and I reverse engineered how it's done. Here's my book.
I know what it is I want to do, but they may not have the tool set yet to deliver that in the most efficient way.
Or they're not concerned with efficiency. I mean, maybe
they're not. Yeah, they said this is the story. Yeah, this is the way it's been in my head for years, and I put it on page, and you're like, that's great. It makes sense to you because it's a story that's been in your head for years. But to someone picking up this book and flipping through it, how legible is it to them? And there is sometimes there can be a larger learning curve on it.
Yeah. So I mean these are basically all my thoughts on volume 1. I mean, it's only 5 issues.
It is. I did want to go back real quick because we got off kind of quickly there on Lee Garbett's art. The one thing I wonder about is when the decision was made character-wise to give Willa just a ginormous mound of hair, because in a world with as she's moving around, as she's even when she's walking around in the party with movement, you see it it's up in the air. It's huge. It is a giant mass that he has to draw, and that Antonia Fabela is coloring there. It looks fantastic in terms of giving dynamic motion to a still image. So from that part, it looks great, but also man, is that tough to draw every time? It seems like a lot to ask there versus someone the Edison character or Dad, any of the male characters that just have short cropped hair. That's it's not going anywhere. It looks the same in zero gravity or normal Earth gravity. And yet with Willa's hair, it's just, it is moving all over the place. It's huge. So yeah, I wonder if the choice to do that was a story reason to help with selling the world.
I mean,
You know?
almost. I mean, it's worth it for the covers and the splash pages,
Oh
basically.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it seems like it would take a lot of extra time
Yeah,
every time
that's what
she
I'm
appears,
saying.
and she's on almost every page.
Yeah, yeah. And I think part of it, so you generally see it. They're thinking about what the character's movement has been so as to show how their hair might react. Like if they're in motion, if they've ascended, descended, if they've been stable for a while, it's eventually it's gonna drop a little. It, I'm not saying they've nailed it 100%, but it does seem like they've put thought into it. And again, that helps with the idea of showing motion, the feeling of motion, the thing you have to do when you're looking at a static image, how your eye moves across the page, moves across the panel. In a world like this, where if you're floating, you're for the most part going to be in some level of constant motion. So how the characters, what direction they're facing, how they're moved, and how their hair reacts to it, things like that. All that stuff helps sell the reader on the world and the feeling of dynamic movement. And so again, it doesn't seem like it's the easiest thing to do, but I can totally see that being, again, a choice they made, not because it was easy to do, but because it helps them sell their world. And it's like, that's worth doing to give some vitality to the page. And again, I agree with you as well. It also looks really dope. It looks really cool on the larger splash pages, on the covers, anything like that. The character design is just so great.
Didn't Jock do the second print cover for this? And I think
either a second print or a variant. I don't remember which one on the.
Okay,
It might have been a second print.
It was like a cover gallery in the back.
It's one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on.
But
Let me scroll back
think
real quick.
his has like both Jock's.
Yeah.
It has Jock's concept for issue 1 second printing cover.
It was second issue. Yeah, second edition.
You see, and then Jock's line art for issue 1 second printing cover. And like the hair is prominently up in the air. And then there's a character design page right in the back. And I would say a third of the image is hair.
Oh yeah, easily.
Like that's the character concept.
It's massive. And again, looks awesome. But you're like, you got to draw that every time, buddy. You got to draw that. I mean, and then you got to hand that off to color.
Because like every time there's like a female like superhero movie, like Captain Marvel, for instance, Brie Larson has to wear like a skull cap wig when they're doing flying scenes because they CGI the herring because it's like, well, hair is just way too unwieldy on film. You don't want it blocking your shot or anything like that. So we'll add it afterwards so it can be big and flowing and we feel like we're flying, but it's not ruining the composition of the shot because hair is erratic.
Yeah, it can be cinematic and do what we want it to do. Absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, like I think there's the similarity there, except that here you're just totally in control of it at all times.
Yeah, it is. And you can draw. So it's not in her face. You can style it or have it shift in the air however you want to match the dramatics of the scene or whatnot. But it is something that it is noticeable to me. I think because, and I think I mentioned this last week as well, the thing that drew me most to this book when I picked it up and flipped through it was Lee Garbett's character design. I think I really like the way he draws characters. I love the way he draws faces and the way he does expressions. I think he's among my favorite artists simply for drawing character faces. I love the way he does it. And it's what drew me to this book. And I was like, well, I'm going to pick this up because it seems like a neat concept, but God, I really love the art. And like, that was enough to get me bought in on this book initially back in the day. So I simply love the way he does it. And he, off of this book, I think I mentioned, he became like one of my favorite artists just off his first book. It's like, well, I got to get everything this got done because I just want to see more of this.
Yeah. Okay. Now that I'm looking at it, every character that's up in the air, the female characters all have long hair.
For the most part, yeah.
Her friend who's a scientist is always standing straight up and comes to an alpha point. and Joan, who she sees on one of the first few pages, has it tied back in a ponytail, which seems like the absolute least you would want to do in a 0G or a low G environment.
Yeah.
But I also
Find a
think
scrunchie or a
there's
hair tie.
something right. But I think these people who have embraced this low G life are free spirited, free flowing. Like, I think the hair symbolizes like what this life is up there.
And also, it's Joan, right? The one in the ponytail. Her job is cleaning houses and apartments on the ground. So she is someone who lives in the sky, but she works. And so, yeah, that idea of being the working class person who doesn't live in the rich neighborhood, but they clean the houses in the rich neighborhood. That's what she does there. And so, yeah, maybe you're right. The idea of, they probably don't want their help to show any sign of that, and which makes me want to scroll back real quick here. Now that you mention it, I want to scroll back to, oh my God, where is it? Yeah, if you scroll back to the party, well, no, there's some women, their hair is up, but it's hard to tell if it's up that way on purpose or it looks like everything is styled to be.
The style is control.
Rigid.
Right.
It looks control and rigid, even though it's up. And then you have Willa come in with this giant mane that is moving and flowing everywhere. And now that I'm thinking about it and looking at it, that definitely feels intentional. That if your hair is styled up, like there's the one lady who was talking about it's a magnetic hem dress that keeps it down.
Yeah.
She has this big shock of hair that goes up to the side to a point, which to me looks like it was styled and gelled.
It was gelled. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
People on the ground are about control, and people in the air are about freedom, and even their hairstyles reflect. So it's just one of those things that just seems like a little throwaway thing, but the way it aligns with everything else in the story, you think, oh my gosh, are these guys geniuses?
Yeah. Well, and you're right. And when you think about it, so now that you mentioned, I'm thinking about Joan. The reason she's like that is because she works on the ground, even though she doesn't live there. But that's probably a requirement.
She's got the in-between, though, right? She takes the tie out when she's off work and flips back up.
But you could see that being a requirement, right?
Oh, yes.
You could see someone being like, hey, if you do this, you have to have your hair tied back. It can't be flowing up. It can't be loose. Whatever that is, you could absolutely, it fits perfectly in the world that would be something she would have to do. Keep her hair a certain length or whatever. So even in a ponytail, it's not flying up sort of thing. Again, just another simple visual way that's unstated, that we had to come to that. But when you look at it, all of it makes sense. All of it makes complete sense.
Yeah. This book really, it knocked me back, looking at the cover, kind of flipping through it really doesn't do it justice. And I think that's the fastest I've read issues or a trade in a long time. It's, it's very readable. There's no narration boxes, which I would imagine is hard to resist in a world building.
There's very little.
Story.
There's some right at the end there when she's on the train. You get a little bit of her thoughts there, but overall there's not a lot of narration.
Oh yeah, I see.
You get a little. You get a little.
One other question, which is,
oh sure,
the fish living in the rainstorm. I'm like, do they conjure, or are they just hanging up in the sky in clouds all the time? And some of them fall when a rainstorm falls. I was like, this I am not tracking with, but I bet there's a reason other than it looks cool. Yeah. But my God, if it looks cool is the only reason, at least it looks cool. Like at least they hit it.
You get maybe rule of cool is what it is. Rule of cool is what it is.
And if the worst is when you're going for a rule of cool and miss, whereas it's like, hey, they put the ball in play in this one. This is like, it's like I stopped and stared at those pages for a little while just because they were so cool. And it's like some of those like
don't think too hard about it, but it's be like, yeah, sure, why not? If there's hovering mounds of water up there, just why wouldn't there be fish who got trapped up in there and be like, hey, look at that, I can breathe again.
Yeah, sizable fish.
Yes, yeah.
So anyway, I guess they grow to the size of their container, which is presumably always the same
And
size, or possibly merges every once in a while with other?
don't know. Yeah, it could be
Yeah.
smaller at some point. You're gonna lose some, but yeah, I again don't put too much thought into it. If it is just because we thought it looked cool, I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. Um, you did mention, I think we maybe mentioned the cover, that first issue cover of Willa inverted, like arms out, like their hair. It's a fantastic first issue cover.
Oh, I mean,
You know,
very often I end up buying the single issues of whatever we discuss on the podcast. And I
oh
looked
yeah,
into this one, and it's like a $15 first issue.
is it really? Okay,
Probably
okay,
low
that's
print run. I mean, according to Comic Geeks, and Comic Geeks is sometimes just out there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I do think I probably low print run. It was also I don't know if we mentioned this. We maybe mentioned it briefly. I can't remember last week. This book was optioned for film, I think, like 2 or 3 months after the first issue came out. So, like, almost immediately it was optioned. Now, again, it hasn't really gone anywhere since then, as most adaptations don't or do. But so I could see it being having value in that sense, mainly because, really just because it's an image number one, you know, that
it's
that
image number
that is
one.
sort
It's a
of thing.
speculator
Yeah.
piece, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And again, probably not the largest print run in the world, so not a whole lot of copies out there for um, um, changing hands. It's a book though you can find the other issues. You can find them in used bookstores and comic shops and things like that. And if you want a complete run, you scrounge. You can probably get probably issues 2 through 14 relatively easily, and then just a matter of finding someone who's got a number one, maybe a little higher than cover price, and boom, you got all 15 issues.
Yeah. It'll be a fun quest for me, especially keeping my eye out to see, like, all right, either one of these guys going to be around the local show anytime in the next few years.
Well, and as I think I mentioned last week, Lee Garbett is the current new artist on an ongoing Daredevil title. So he's been doing a lot of shifts nearby. Him and Stephanie Phillips, the writer together. So you just launched that now, and they will hopefully be on the title for a while together. I think Lee Garbett is pretty fast, or at least I don't think he's slow. But it's a mainline major title at one of the big books. They can bring in guest artists for arcs and things like that. But if he's the main guy for a while there, being on a premier title, a major title at one of the big two, it's a higher likelihood, we'll say, that he's going to make appearances at some of the larger shows, and just make more appearances in general, just to help with the book. So yeah, maybe he'll come by again, nearish by. He's the kind of guy that I could see Marvel wanting to be out there because they want to keep interest up in the Daredevil book. So I think the chances are higher now that he's the ongoing artist on Daredevil than it was prior, when it was mainly just doing creator-owned stuff and spot work here and there. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just Skyward and
it also almost, like, especially if Marvel's pushing you to go to cons and stuff, you're definitely charging more money for signatures than you would otherwise.
And again, got no idea if they're doing that or not, but it makes sense. Like, again, when I was in Chicago for C2E2, him and Stephanie Phillips are both repped by Comic Sketch Art. And not only were they tabled together, all their signings were together. So the implication was, if you're coming to these guys, you're doing it because Daredevil #1 technically came out the following Wednesday. Not to say you can't have books for Stephanie Phillips or books for Lee Garbett, because I actually asked that question. I was like, is this line for both of them or one or the other? And the answer was, it's for both of them. So if you just wanted to get Stephanie Phillips or just wanted to get Lee Garbett, you had to get in the line and wait to go both through. So the idea that they were there specifically promoting Daredevil tells me that they at least are doing that early on. So yeah, maybe later in the year, if they keep the book going strong, you'll see them, because they want to make that push and want to keep the hype up and keep the attention on it. So yeah, the chances are higher now than they would have been, a few months ago. So It's the second time I've seen Lee Garbett at a show, which was very cool. He's someone that I always have books for generally, because if he has a variant cover or something like that, which he hasn't done a ton of, but he's someone his work I love. And maybe I'll get to see him at another show sometime relatively soon. It'd be always good to see.
That's the dream for me, especially when they come to me, which is a big ask, but a moderate ask anyway. But anyway,
come to you in a 2.5 hour
mile radius.
Around.
Yeah. So anyway, that is it for Volume 1, My Logi Life. We will be back next Thursday with Volume 2. Here There Be Dragonflies, issues 6 through 10.
6 through 10, yep.
And I basically made myself stop reading because I could have finished this whole series in one sitting. I would have been up later than I wanted to with young children in the house. But I was like, also for the sake of the podcast, I'm just going to stick to my normal thing of kind of reading with the book club pace. Like, because I can't imagine, I have never been part of like an actual real book club before, like an in-person gathering, going through whatever Reese Witherspoon's reading or whatever, or Oprah.
Neither have I.
But I suspect it's a party foul to show up to the first one and be like, I just read the whole book. Let's talk. And then, when people were like, oh, I think this might happen, the person who read it all was like, it's like, like you're.
Unless it's the book club where like you only meet after you read the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know how those work. Is it like, do you meet periodically, or I don't know.
I mean, I like, my mother-in-law's in 2 book clubs that meet every week. So I assume they are breaking it down into chunks of some kind.
Or they're just really voracious readers. You never know.
I'm certain that isn't the case.
Fair enough.
In this particular case. So yeah, maybe there are people that are that way, but I don't see her tearing through 52 books a year.
Sure.
So, I mean, no judgment, but very few people tear through 52 books a year. So
very much,
no unintentional like stray shots there intended. But anyway, I'm gonna shut up before we do any more damage. I will see you all next Thursday. Thank you for listening, and read Volume 2. We'll see you then.
Peace.